Hey everyone, I'm Scott Cunningham, aka Sconcy Business, and today we're here with Forrest, aka Hashoshi, as you guys know him on YouTube. So we're going to talk about Ethereum today, and before we jump into all of the technical stuff, I'm curious, what are some of your favorite Ethereum dapps or like Ethereum services that you use or you just know about and you like?
Yeah, there are a lot of cool ones. I think there are some that are coming out in terms of NFTs that are unbelievable. As much as
Mm,
people hate on them from a congestion standpoint, I think the classic NFTs like the Crypto Kitties, Crypto Zombies, which is now moved to the Loom network, those are
mhm,
great projects. Like those things are really cool. Now you have these ERC 1155 projects coming out, which is like the next generation of non-fungible tokens like Crypto Kitties, where you can have one non-fungible token with a certain supply. Really cool
mm,
stuff, unbelievable stuff, and I think those are the future. But I think there are other ones that have sort of come off of Ethereum, like Maker and Dai. The
mhm.
stable coin and DeFi stuff is really powerful. So I think
Okay.
DeFi and NFTs are the stuff I'm watching this year for sure.
Yeah, I spoke with the team of CryptoKitties when I was at Blockchain Boost in Toronto,
Mhm.
and yeah, like it's really interesting what they're doing. What like I'm also a little iffy with NFT. Like I love the idea of NFTs, but I'm also kind of like iffy on what games and stuff are out there now in terms of like whether or not they're actually games or if it's really just like gambling more or less. Like
Yeah,
what are your thoughts on there? Like I don't want to be judgmental of the space because I do really like it, but like for people who say, well, it's really just kind of like a more gamified gambling. Like what would you say for that?
yeah, no, and I think to an extent I agree. If you really think about it, when you do like generating a new crypto kitty or crypto zombie, a lot of that is a lottery. It's like how lucky can you get in terms of how
Mm,
that DNA, just a long number or string, what you get, right? And that's how valuable it is whatever DNA combination you get. So in that case, yeah, it's very much gambling. But I think as this stuff develops more, we're going to see more well thought out and more complicated games built around them. But I also
mhm.
don't think that we're going to have games running and like doing computation on Ethereum. Like it doesn't make sense. That's not what it's built for. But I think Ethereum would be a great place to host the creation of digital assets that can live beyond a game's useful life. You know,
Yeah, yeah. I think NFTs in terms of like when I think about games, I'm thinking like if CS:GO skins were all NFTs on Ethereum, I think that would be an amazing way to do it, and then also allowing them to actually have like full control over all of their assets that they earn in game and then actually be able to sell them and trade them really easily rather than being confined to the in-game system and having to like just hope that the person's going to PayPal you or whatever and then you
right.
trade it to them, and that would be such an amazing solution for Ethereum. For me, some of my favorite projects are like the Ethereum name service. Now that we can get like .eth
Yeah,
addresses, that's
great point.
huge. And then Mines.com and Uptrend, because they both use Ethereum, not necessarily on the blockchain, but they have tokens on the blockchain. So,
Right.
because I'm really interested in like social media, that's kind of my thing
Nice. Yeah.
for blockchain. And yeah, for me, it's Mines and Uptrend. Are you on either of those right now?
No, I'm not, but I'll
Oh,
check
okay.
them out. I've actually seen you talk about on Twitter Uptrend, but
Yeah, yeah. I'm actually doing a giveaway with them right now for Uptrend. Yeah, they're really interesting one. They're kind of like a merge between Minds and Steam. I'm sure you probably are you on Steam or
yeah,
yeah, yeah. So you're on
I was
Steam. Okay.
sure.
Yeah, because that's kind of like the big one.
That's the OG,
But
you know.
yeah, exactly. Everyone else is just kind of trying to replicate or make a different version of Steam.
Mhm.
But yeah, no, there's a lot of interesting projects out there. But yeah, let's dive into Ethereum. What do you want to start with here?
Well, I think the first thing is just let's talk through how we feel about where Ethereum is right now. So you can kick it off. If you had to give you're giving like sentiment analysis for Ethereum and what's going to happen in 2020. Like, where are you at on that?
Yeah, I mean, with the update and with the Bitcoin having on the way, my sentiment is that it's like I'm hoping and I feel that it's probably going to go up a good amount. But obviously this isn't financial advice for anyone listening. But yeah, no, I have a good feeling about Ethereum. I mean, I recently saw this on the 15th. I think it's Adam Cochran or something like that. He put out this huge list of all of these companies. I'll actually send you the link just in case you're curious to check this out as well. Sure. But it was all of the companies that have started to build on Ethereum. And, there's huge companies like Nike, even Barclays, TD, like TD, Ameritrade, Cisco, Walmart, tons like FedEx, Microsoft, Intel, just an insane amount of companies that are starting to actually build on Ethereum. And I think a lot of people would say like, oh, EOS is the enterprise blockchain. I would say no, because like it's got so many congestion issues that everyone has to launch their stuff on private chains like Voice coming out soon.
Right.
And Ethereum is just blowing up in the enterprise space. So I'm really excited to see that. And I'm really interested to see these things come to fruition. And if they all start launching this year, then I'm sure the price is just going to go insane. Right.
Yeah, I hear you, man. I mean, I think, for me, price aside, I think this year is crunch time for not just Ethereum. It's really Ethereum and everyone else who's been trying to usurp them for this whole entire past, I guess, 2 years now, 3 years now.
Yeah.
I think that come this year, I think it may be June, July, is the 5th anniversary of Ethereum. So I think it would be sort of apt that Ethereum starts pushing things out around that time. I don't think that that's the plan, or that was the plan, because I think at the end of 2019, we were supposed to see not only the Istanbul hard fork, which ended up happening, but the move to the beacon chain, like the first step or step 0 of Ethereum 2.0. So from the perspective that these things need to happen in 2020, how are you feeling about some of the conversations that have been going on Twitter? Like, where do you see Ethereum going? Do you think we're going to see a significant amount of development in 2020 for Ethereum 2.0?
Yeah, I mean, like, I definitely think the dev team is just going to be going strong this year. Like Vitalik recently said, Ethereum will be the Ethereum killer. So I thought that was pretty funny.
That's cool.
Right, because like everyone's saying like, oh, like what's going to be the next thing to beat Ethereum? Because like I said, a lot of people are saying, oh, EOS is going to be the enterprise chain, and I wholeheartedly disagree. But like I just think it's funny how he says Ethereum will be the Ethereum killer, because I honestly think like 2.0 is going to be big, and once we see a lot more of the development, I'm sure people will kind of, like the sentiment will kind of catch up with that as well. And yeah, like you said, price aside, even really just looking at the technology, I think like that's where we're going to see a lot of big improvements this year.
Honestly, I think we're off on the right track, right? I think that it's disappointing. People are frustrated that in 2019 we didn't see Beacon Chain. The Istanbul hard fork had a bunch of delays, and everyone was kind of freaked out about it. But I'm of the mind that until projects like Cardano push out their Shelley updates, which include staking, delegation, incentive, and then Goguen, which is the subsequent release to push out their Haskell-based Haskell-based smart contract solution. Like until those things happen, and then other projects that includes EOS, etc., until they push out their main releases to compete against Ethereum, I don't think it's an emergency for them to push and try and push out software that's not quite ready. Like, I'd rather them wait until the last possible second to get things out there, if that means they have an extra 2 months to regression test with dapps that exist today. Because even with, and that's another point, not to give everyone whiplash with the change of topic, but some of the changes that happened in the most recent hard fork in Istanbul, when they changed pricing and optimized opcodes for the blockchain, for Ethereum, it changed pricing for certain dapps, and that broke a ton of stuff. I know that Gemini had issues moving ETH from their cold and hot wallets, like in between those two. You had certain dapps that were not, pricing correctly, and those things are very difficult to predict about how they're going to be used in practice, because gas is a very intricate art that you have to master as a developer in this space. So I think that's a big one, is being able to go in and say, okay, now that we're pushing out of these updates, it's not does it work in testnet? Is it going to work with every single dApp that's out there today if people migrate properly? And that's the biggest issue, because it's not a brand new blockchain, even though technically it is. There are a lot of services that rely on Ethereum that are going to also have to move over that direction as well for the new Ethereum 2.0 chain.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I mean, I've seen some chatter on Twitter and elsewhere where people were concerned that like the nodes weren't going to switch over to the new fork fast enough, or like concerns that there would be another chain created because of this. But it seems everything went fine, and it's kind of just, people getting, scared of it not happening as quickly as they would like, right? And that's just kind of something that we always deal with. And I keep going back to EOS because I feel like it's a great comparison, since they're right in the top there. Like when I say to people on EOS, I'm like, well, I mean, I can't even make a transaction because of the congestion right now. So, and they would just say, oh, well, like it's going to be the best. It's going to be better than Ethereum and everything else. Just wait. It's like, okay, well, Ethereum does work now. And the majority of dApps that I know are on Ethereum or Steam, really. And everything else is kind of, like hit or miss in terms of like the dApps actually working or still having support or whatever it might be. And I mean, like I do comprehensive reviews of like social media dApps. And in my next one, there's over 100 platforms that I've looked at, and the majority of them are Steam or Ethereum. And outside of that, it's it's like I said, it's really hit or miss. Like a lot of the EOS ones don't work, don't have support, had to move to a different chain, had to set up a private chain because the public blockchain doesn't work. So yeah, I mean, like Ethereum, in terms of like what's actually being built on it and what exists on it now, it really seems to be one of the stronger ones, if not the strongest. And I only think it's going to get better as they continue to improve it. So, what do you think about like the switch from proof of work to proof of stake, and the like the general sentiment in the market around that?
I think that it is a controversial decision, albeit one that is necessary, right? So if someone were to say, let's move Bitcoin from proof of work to proof of stake, that would bother me, right? Because there is that's like the last strategy that you go to pull out extra scale. And I'm not convinced that Bitcoin as a protocol needs that. And also, you talk about staying true to the protocol that is Bitcoin. The implementation should not move that direction. You need that verification for Bitcoin, right? Ethereum's use case and the entire ethos of Ethereum is totally different. And so I actually think that this is a good move to move this direction. I think that a lot of people expected this to happen in like 2018 and not 2020 or 2021. And the reason that it didn't is because I think the initial ideas that they had for proof of stake and implementation didn't work out the way that they wanted them to when they started running testing and models and all these things. The problem with proof of stake is that it's a really intricate balance to prevent extremely centralizing forces to take over, because people inherently reinforce centralization. And so I think that's the ironic thing, is that a lot of people are saying, oh, well, we need all this decentralized stuff and we need everything to remain perfectly decentralized. Yet people naturally gravitate towards centralized systems. And even when they're not centralized from the beginning, they overall become more centralized for convenience because something goes wrong. Look at Ethereum during the DAO hack. Everyone's saying, yay, decentralization, and then something goes wrong and they lose money. Now they want the centralized guy, Vitalik, to fix it. He does, and now he's criticized for it at the end of the day. People love centralization as much as the community that we're in talk about how much people hate it. So that's the challenge, is can you build a system that is going to inherently resist that tendency and prevent the whales that have a ton of resources from taking over, or from people and prevent people from colluding and becoming whales themselves and then centralizing. Those are challenges that have precipitated this delay, I think, in the protocol being released. At least that's my personal opinion.
Yeah, no, I mean, that makes a lot of sense to me. It really seems like, there's just a lot of people who are just reluctant to, like, I mean, at the end of the day, it's like whether he goes with centralization, like not actually for centralization, but he, fixes it in a centralized way. It's like whether he does or he doesn't, people are still going to criticize him. So it's like, which of the two evils do you want to go with? It's like, what's going to be better for the Ethereum project in the long run? Obviously, that's kind of where it's going to go. And it's funny. We all want decentralization, but we also want the benefits of centralization, like performance and, being able to fix things very quickly and easily. Yeah. So it's like, there's always kind of that like balance between the two and the struggle between the two. And it's a hard battle to play, but you've always got, strong entities on both sides advocating for both. But at the end of the day, you got to strike some balance. I mean, I'm sure you probably are too, leaning more towards decentralization, but of course, we still appreciate some of the benefits of centralization, because it's like you can't be 100% decentralized. Like, it's just not realistic. Yeah, exactly. And people who like scream that it has to be 100% decentralized is just not realistic, because how it would be so much more challenging for consensus, and it would just it would just be really, really challenging to actually get things done. And like, even if we just look at like politics, for example, not that I'm going to take this to political sense, but even if you look at politics, every year less and less like bills are passed because it's so much more challenging for them to find consensus. So like, I mean, that's kind of the flip side, because that's centralized, but the way that they try to actually vote, they make it more and more challenging for themselves. So we don't want to do that in the other sense of making it so decentralized that we can't come to consensus, and then we slow down the process and actually progressing and making changes. Because if we have to make less and less changes every year because we're trying to be more decentralized, then it's going to get less and less done, and we can't, revert things or fix things. It'll take longer and longer to actually do that, and then it'll kind of like it'll shoot itself in the foot, so to speak. So there definitely has to be a balance.
I mean, decentralization is a spectrum, right? Like, there is it's not you either aren't decentralized or you are. It is, how decentralized has this protocol been designed to be? Because different use cases need different levels of decentralization, right? So you're going to fall differently on that scale. And then the next measure is, how resistant is that protocol that you've designed to being shifted in one direction or the other away from what you've optimized it to be? Because if those two things aren't well defined and well refined in the implementation, the protocol is not going to work. And I think that's part of the reason why EOS has had so many challenges, is because Dan Larimer goes from BitShares to Steem to EOS. Every single time is learning lessons about how to implement delegated proof of stake.
Yeah.
The issue is now with EOS, there are some like just key implementation challenges where people didn't react the way that they thought they would to like resources, the RAM, CPU stuff. People didn't react the same way that they thought they would in terms of spinning up, their a cloud instance and then lending resources to the network. People clearly didn't really want to do that very much, or didn't know how to, or whatever. And so it got challenging, and then the network started to get congested. So then the people that did do it are like, why am I going to bother? And they leave. And that's the challenge. So it's like, even though the protocol on paper and design wise made sense, I think implementation wise, now they're having to go back, make some changes and come back. And that's a natural cycle of software. So I think that projects get a lot of flack in this space for stuff that's really normal. I can't even tell you what V1 software that anyone's used that is good. Very few. And so the fact that we have these projects coming out with V1 stuff that actually works, even if it breaks over time when people start working with it more, just because it's public doesn't mean that it's held to any different. It means that it's being held to a different standard, is my point, than other software is. Well, I think a lot of times the stuff that we're using today is what would be still in beta for 2 years internally at a Microsoft or an Apple, et cetera. And we're getting to test it and use it, and it's breaking, and that's naturally the cycle. But of course, it's harder to update because now you have to do hard forks. And that's why Dan Larimer leaves projects and goes and does something else, because it's harder for him to make changes and his engineering team to fix stuff because now you got a hard fork. So it's like, okay, I'm just going to take lessons learned and do something else.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, like the huge issue I have with EOS is when I always like to consider things like from the average person. Like if we're really going to see adoption, like can the average like non-crypto person even like start to use this? I feel like Ethereum isn't totally there, but it's ridiculously closer than, for example, EOS, right? Like now we have like .eth addresses. Not that that's like restricted to ETH, but I mean, obviously people are going to be associating it with ETH, and it doesn't include EOS right now. So obviously it's a lot more aimed at Ethereum and obviously some other major tokens. But, like there's just so much more usability for the average person, and it's so much more simple. And especially, again, like considering what would the average person think if I told them, well, like if you want to use EOS, you have to put in a ton of money to stake to be able to make transactions, or you can use Ethereum and you can pay per transaction and it's extremely cheap. It's like, okay, well, is the average person gonna want to invest a bunch of money in something they know nothing about, right? And I would say no, right? Because I only have like 25 EOS staked in my CPU, and I obviously I'm not going to put more because I can't even get my money back anyways. And I can't make transactions. So it's like, if someone new came into the space, they'd be like, why would I invest like $100 to be able to make a few transactions a day when I could just use Ethereum or something that is working better? Again, like you said, they are very early on, and it's like break, rinse, like fix, rinse, repeat. But when there are things like Ethereum that are not having these issues right now, it's like, people aren't going to go and use every blockchain, especially when they're new to the space. I think it's more realistic that they're going to go to like the top movers, right? That's why Facebook replaced MySpace, because there's only going to be a few at the end of the day that people are actually going to take the time to invest in.
Yeah, I agree. And your Facebook to MySpace example is apt, because the interesting thing is that Facebook, people think now, they look at Facebook and they're like, the reason why they won out is because they had the better social network. They had a nice UI. They had all this stuff. Facebook looked and felt like garbage when it first came out. Like, it was really bad, but people still went to it. And the reason was twofold. The architecture behind Facebook allowed it to build features that MySpace would never be able to implement. It took that like archaic feeling people wanted to like just connect with somebody else, set up events, talk to each other, just interact with each other, and do it like lightning fast. I don't know if you remember, and I don't know how old you are, but if you were on MySpace at all,
I was for a little bit back in the day.
Yeah, because I mean, I loved MySpace when I was younger. Like, that was my thing. But you make a change and then you'd refresh the page, and then sometimes it wouldn't show up, and then you refresh again, and then it would show up, right? It was a little clunky. It was slow. It was cool, but it was clunky. Facebook invented this engine that would give you instant gratification, and they originally, what made them famous and what made them great is they invented this architecture that allowed them to scale to unbelievable levels. And they're remembered today because of all the other stuff they've built, but that was the first thing. So I think we're in the same place with these protocols. It's like the next Facebook might be around the corner. It might already exist, but it also might not. And Ethereum really does work. And my main job basically is I like to build dapps on Ethereum. That's the protocol that I use the most because it's the one that works the best, and it's the one that has the biggest developer mindshare out there by a long shot. But that's the key advantage, is that they have the first mover in that regard, because all the people, talented minds and developers that wanted to get involved in this space, they invested their time in Ethereum and now have stuck with it. So like the people that are behind Truffle, Prismatic Labs, Casper, all these companies and all these organizations and people that focus on Ethereum development, they probably got into that because it was the first protocol that they were introduced to. So now all these cool things that we have, like the ENS stuff, these guys have been working on this for years.
Mm-hmm.
And now it's real and it's awesome, but that takes some serious dedication. And there are projects out there that just don't have that type of dedication and resources to build stuff that makes them easier to work with. So I think that's another thing to think about, is resource wise, what can be invested to make it easier to interact with? Because you're totally right when you say, how easy is it for a new user to get on and do something with it, you know? So just to put it into perspective a little bit more, if we were to see Ethereum go from not quite yet there toward like pushing towards Serenity, their name for Ethereum 2.0, mid-year, they get the beacon chain across the finish line. Towards the end of the year, they get proof of stake, the preliminary stuff in. And then after that, they do WebAssembly for smart contracts, and they do the new virtual machine and all that stuff. So let's just say 2021, we have Ethereum 2.0 in all of its glory, and then they're tracking for any updates and forks after that. Do you think it gets harder for people to understand and interact with Ethereum because of that new complexity? And do you think that sets them back, even though it's what everyone's been waiting for?
Yeah, I mean, as long as it doesn't have a huge impact to like the user experience, like I know it'll probably have some impact, but I think in terms of like the end user, like using dapps and stuff, I don't think it'll really change drastically for them, aside from like maybe like cheaper transactions. Like I think for the most part, they will see a positive like change rather than like a complex, like rather than it be getting more complex. I'm not necessarily thinking that it's going to get simpler, but I think it'll get faster. So at the very least, I think for the most part, they're just going to see positive impact from that. I'm sure in a higher level, it might become like more complex, and obviously people are going to have to, you know, go with that learning curve. But I think the most important thing is like the end user not having a drastic impact and having to like relearn things would be the biggest thing. And I think that won't be an issue, but I'm curious to hear what you think.
Yeah, I mean, I think it does depend. And the reason I asked you is almost because it's a hypothetical question for anyone, because we don't know. I think that there's going to be, for some dApps that are not as tightly knit into the Ethereum world, there's going to be a little exodus of people who don't want to deal with the technical debt or the overhead of having to move to change their dApps if that's necessary. Anytime you change the virtual machine and you like, they're moving from the EVM today to a new version of that, and then also adding in WebAssembly, which is good, but it's going to introduce some changes and people are going to have to get used to those. So maybe that has an impact on the end user. I don't know.
Yeah. And to what you were saying, like with dApps changing. So would you say then that's more of dependent on how the developers deal with like the changes, rather like it would affect the end user, obviously, if the dApp didn't change. But I guess, would you say the responsibility then will probably end up falling on the developers as to whether or not they can work with these changes, and then that will be what would end up affecting the end user? Or would you say it's kind of Like it's on both of them.
Well, I don't know how the migration's going to work, so it's hard for me to
Mhm.
say
Yeah, it's still
specifically.
hypothetical. Yeah.
But I have a feeling there's going to be onus on both. I think the developers are obviously going to have to react to any changes that happen to the, like they did for Istanbul. They're going to have to react to any changes in the EVM and pricing and like cost calculation. Those are clear. They're also going to have to figure out, are there any tools that we can now use to make our dapps better? Because each of these improvement proposals should be introducing positive change rather than negative. It's hit or
Mhm.
miss. I also think that this means that at the end of the day, end users are probably going to have to understand the changes that are going to happen, because not all dapps have the guardrails up to make sure you don't do something like dumb, for lack of a better term. Um, Also, is there going to be like an image migration from the main Ethereum chain to the new one? Does that mean you're going to have to go through a registration step to claim any like hard fork tokens? Is that not going to happen? I think there are some things that I don't know enough about in that regard. Maybe no one knows enough about except the people working on it to say honestly where the responsibility falls for each individual. But it could, and that's why I asked. I was just curious if, from your perspective, even from social media dapps, if Steam were to make changes like this, there would be significant changes to the way that costs are evaluated. It might come with a significant token price, which changes the economics of the whole platform. You never know.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so I mean, I'm just hoping that the devs can figure it out, and obviously we're all hoping that it's just going to get better and not worse. Um
Yeah.
but yeah, I mean, I have faith that the Ethereum community and the devs have been doing a really really good job, and that they're going to continue to do so. And I mean, it's interesting when I keep going back to EOS and
Hmm.
Ethereum, comparing them. When EOS has like $4 billion behind it,
Yeah.
and they can't figure out how to fix their congestion in over 3 months now. And Ethereum, is like, maybe they're making delays with updates and stuff, but it still works, right? So it's interesting that, like, with so much less of a backing to it, that they're able to do so much with it, and
Right.
and that really speaks to how well the devs are doing, and I think that's really really key. And that's why I have like faith and hope that they're going to continue to do a good job, and really push through this, and that we won't have too much of a friction caused from the changes for the end users and the developers. I'm curious, when did you get into Ethereum? Like, when did you start investing and actually start looking into it?
Um, I think my first introduction, my first experimentation with Ethereum happened early in its life in 2015. I think the first valuable anything that I built with Ethereum, and at this time, early on in crypto, had no money, so like I could not afford to invest the way that I think some people could have. So
Mm.
timing is everything. But for me, it was more, I was like, at that period, definitely a novice developer. I always consider myself a novice developer because I'm always learning stuff. But 4 or 5 years ago, I was really learning the ropes in terms of how to develop actual software that makes sense, not just what you learn in school or what you learn in boot camps. And
Mhm.
so the first thing I ever built was this like budget tracker smart contract. Then I built a little gambling dApp. And these are all things that I was just doing on my own to learn. Um, and that was in 2016. And so it's interesting looking back on that and seeing how much stuff has changed and how much better the tooling and the network itself is. Obviously, back then it was cheap to do things on mainnet. Now you do not develop anything on mainnet. You develop it all in test nets because it's too expensive.
Mhm.
But it's all minor stuff. I mean, it's open source. Everything you can just dig in to like every single thing related to Ethereum. You just dive in and it's all there. And I love that about it. Um, people criticize Ethereum about the NFTs and stuff like crypto kitties that congested the network. I just don't think anyone was ready for the ingenuity that it took to create a game like that, and the size of the data that those individual contracts were pushing through the network. So that was cool to see, because while it was negative in terms of the consequence, at the end of the day, people were like, whoa, you can build such cool stuff. And now here we are, we have these new Ethereum standards. You have ERC 721, 1155, all these cool things coming out that were precipitated by that event. That's what really spurred me on. It's just cool stuff kept happening with Ethereum. So I'm like, I'm just going to keep building and keep learning and keep pushing forward on it. And the rest is history. Here I am, 2020, 4 or 5 years later, and I'm still building stuff as much as I can.
Yeah. Did you also was that right around when you kind of started getting into crypto in general as well? Or when did you actually start getting into the crypto blockchain space?
That's another fantastic question, which I would like to hear your story as well after. But my crypto story actually started in what was high school for me. I was in a class in 2008, 2009. I'm on StumbleUpon, not paying attention because I'm that good student, and the Bitcoin white paper shows up, and so I'm reading it. It's cool. I love technology from a young age, so anything that involved tech I was interested in. And this was the first time that I read something that I just couldn't put down, so I printed it out at school. I marked it up, highlighted it. I kept reading it, telling people about it, and I just kind of got hooked on it from there. The whole concept behind it, blockchain, digital
So you were
money,
there right at the beginning, basically, eh?
by sweet serendipity only. And I can't even. And I remember there's one specific day I was at the shopping mall. I was in Macy's and I was walking out and I see this billboard. It's the first time I'd ever seen Bitcoin show up anywhere outside of my imagination or a couple of nerd people around that I knew. And I heard people talking about it it's that digital money, it's not backed by anything, it doesn't make sense. And that's the start of it. I realized wow, this is actually a thing that's going to be contentious and people are going to talk about, because I think it was the day that it was on a cover of some magazine. That's why it was there. Mm-hmm. Super cool stuff. And I think fondly back on that all the time, how random it is that it has now created a career, a hobby in this channel, all that sort of thing. Super cool. But what about you, man?
Yeah.
Where did it start?
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, I've only just recently got into it. I mean, I got into it just before the crash of 2017, unfortunately for me.
Yeah.
Because I got into it via investing. And even though I lost a bunch of money in the early 2018, I was like, okay, maybe I'm not the greatest at trading, but what's I was interested in the technology because I went to school for networking and IT security. I was always into computers in high school, and that was always kind of my thing. And so I was looking into the technology. I was like, what else is on here? And I started to get into social media marketing as my day job. So I was looking into what kind of social media applications are being built on here. And when I found Steemit, I was super intrigued at how you can just earn money from just getting upvotes and just participating in this network. And from there, my journey was just kind of exploring all these different dapps and, just seeing what was out there and making tutorials to show people what I've learned. Because I also realized there wasn't a lot of information. So it was kind of challenging for people to get started. And then it just kind of blossomed from there. But I'm a lot later into the space, absolutely. But I remember looking at Ethereum when it was $15, and just before I actually started investing myself. I guess I was kind of aware of it a little before I actually started investing. And I told my friend about it, and I was like, this looks super interesting. And I was like, and if you look at Bitcoin, like this Ethereum thing, it looks like it's gonna do really, really well. And I didn't have any money to invest.
Yeah.
He invested and he made a ton of money, and I was like, shit.
Yeah.
But yeah, so like that was really funny and unfortunate for me that I didn't invest early enough. But
Yeah.
and then when I did invest, there was the crash. So yeah, clearly investing was not my strong suit. But
Yeah. I mean,
but it was a really interesting time, and I'm just super interested in the technology, and I think it's definitely going places. It's really crazy that like today it's so much further along where like, you know, you can just send Ethereum to like a similar to a domain, like a .eth address, and I have like crypto Visa cards that I can just, you know, spend at a regular place.
yeah.
Because the number one thing that people will ask, like every time I jump in an Uber, I'll always ask them, like, do you know what crypto is? Like, it always kind of gives me a feel because they're talking to people all
Yeah.
day. And a lot of times they'll say, yeah, but the biggest question that I always get is, it's like, but can you really just like go to the grocery store and buy something? And I was like, yeah. And I was like, well, you can now. So like that's why I think we're getting a lot closer to mass adoption, where it's like, yeah, anyone actually can use this. It's just not well known enough, or people still have to get over the resistance of getting started. But once we get through all of that, I think it's really going to become prominent, because, you know, you can just spend it with a card or easily send it to someone's address without, you know, having to copy and paste or, you know, do all this different stuff that makes it a lot more challenging. I think we're really getting close to that point. So that's kind of my crypto journey. I'm a lot later into the game than you are, but yeah, that's what I did.
Yeah, I mean, that's awesome. I think there's this weird thing in the space where the people who came in 2017, or if you come in late, it's like you're lesser of a crypto person. Like the OGs are better, you know. It's like that's not even total nonsense in my opinion, because you could be an OG and total like toxic waste for the space, and you can be someone who came in yesterday who's building something that's really valuable. So I think that to that end, that's something that I would love to see change in the community. But I think, you know, beyond that, going off another thing that you said is, when I started doing YouTube videos, I thought I literally just don't like trading. Like I have this like mental aversion to trading crypto, and really trading anything. Like if I believe in something and I believe in it long term, cool, happy to just put my money there. But I will never I'll never like actively trading something. So yeah. I originally started this channel thinking I need to have an opinion about price. Now, maybe early on in my channel, you might have heard me say stuff about price. Now, I don't say anything about price, because to me, price does not matter at all. If you're building something good, and you're building something that people can use, and you're building something developers can use, that's a big one for me, because if I go on your SDK and it doesn't work, I'm done. Yeah. If all those things are there, the price will come. Like the users will come. You just have to build something. So price, I stay away from now, and it's like it's been the most liberating thing for my channel, at least, because it's just not my thing. I'm like a tech guy, and that's what makes me happy. But that's not to say that people who talk about price are bad. I'm just saying, I think some people think they have to have an opinion on price. Like on Twitter, you scroll, like everyone's saying, oh, like here's my TA. It's like, is that something you like, or are you just doing it because people want to hear like what your thoughts are, or, you know, or whatever? Get
more hype going. Yeah. No, I totally agree with that sentiment. I mean, given that I lost so much money in the crash, I definitely never considered myself good at trading. I mean, I just hold a lot of coins, and I just hope for like the Bitcoin halving to work out really well. Then I'll talk about price after that. But no, I mean, like I'm never like really looking to give advice or, have people coming to my channel hoping that I'm going to give them hope, or thinking that I'm going to give them hope for some big price rise, and then they get upset when it doesn't or whatever. For me, it's really just like exploring all the different things that are happening in blockchain. And I think that's much more interesting and much more relevant, because everyone can have an opinion on price, but like it just seems much more interesting to me to actually like discover new things and learn about what's going on. And I come much more from like an educational and like discovering new stuff kind of standpoint, rather than trying to like push my opinion and then get people to follow me and then start a course and then have a paid group where you give price analysis, you know what I mean? So
and I mean, some people do that. Like, some people do that and they do it the right way. And it's like, you make calls to the best of your ability. So it's not going to pan out no matter how good you are. It's not going to pan out every time. And then some people really deserve that. Like, they deserve the followership, they deserve the paid group, the course, whatever, that, that's fantastic. But I think there's so much cool stuff to talk about. Like with Ethereum, I don't think the average person realizes how difficult implementing sharding is, like breaking the main chain into smaller pieces that are basically like sub-operating individual blockchains that then feed back to the beacon chain, right? Yeah. Speaking about how that works and what the challenges are, understanding that smart contracts, they execute, and that same execution has to be validated and established as final by all the participants in the network to an extent before it's really valid, right? Mm-hmm. Sharding that up and breaking up like state sharding is really tough. And so that's why this sharding stuff's taking forever and it's taking time. There's so much stuff to learn about this, that whether you want to learn about price, you want to learn about TA, you want to learn about tech, all this stuff, there's always a place to go.
Yeah. And that's our channels. No.
There you go.
Yeah, I mean, I just realized we're getting pretty close to an hour here, and I have I have an interview coming up soon with the CEO of Bravo Coin. So that'll be interesting to check out. They have like a incentivized like referral kind of program that they have going on. But this was a really, really good chat, and I think this will kind of give people an interesting perspective on what's going on with Ethereum, and maybe a little bit of background on what we do with our channels. And and like you said, like I'm definitely not knocking people who are doing price analysis and everything. It's just not my thing. And there's so much of that out there, and I feel like there's not enough of what we're doing, where we're like looking at new things and showing people like what's going on in the space outside of the investing standpoint. I feel like most of it is investing, so it's nice to see the other side of things where we're like just looking at the technology and kind of giving people a take on what's going on in the space. But I really appreciate you setting coming on and doing this. I know we had to move around some scheduling a little bit, but I appreciate you coming on and doing this.
100%, man. Thanks for having me. I'm always down. Let's do it again soon.
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe we can follow up eventually after Ethereum gets going, or maybe after the halving or something. We can take a look at what's going on in the space.
Yeah, sounds good to me, man. Thanks again for having me on, and enjoy the cold weather in Canada, my friend.
Yes, it is quite cold up here. I'm sure you guys have a lot better weather where you're at. Again, thank you so much, everyone. Make sure to go and check out his channel. What are some of your handles? You can throw them all out there for people to go and check you out.
For sure, man. It's the same handle everywhere. Hashoshi4 everywhere. Twitter and YouTube are the two places I'm most active. I'm sure you can probably toss links in the description below if you want. And yeah, of course, thanks guys for spending the time. Really, really appreciate it.
Awesome. All right. Cheers.
Cheers, man.